I remember that summer vividly. I was about 15, and my family decided to spend a few weeks camping near the lake. It was the perfect escape from the sweltering heat of the city. We set up our campsite, complete with a cozy tent and a small bonfire pit. Days were filled with swimming, hiking, and enjoying the company of my parents and younger brother. One evening, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the tranquil waters. The crackling of the campfire filled the air, and we all huddled close, sharing stories and roasting marshmallows. My little brother was captivated by the stars that dotted the night sky, and my parents laughed and reminisced about their own childhood camping trips. As the fire dwindled and everyone retreated to their tents, I lay in my sleeping bag, feeling the cool breeze against my skin. I could hear the distant hum of insects and the soft lapping of water against the shore. It was peaceful, serene, until a rustling noise interrupted the quiet. I lay still, my heart quickening as I strained my ears to listen. The rustling grew louder, closer. A chill ran down my spine as I realized that the sound was coming from just outside my tent. It was too rhythmic to be the wind, it sounded deliberate. Fear clenched my chest, and I held my breath, hoping that whatever was out there would just move along. But then, I heard it, a low, guttural growl. My pulse raced, and I felt a surge of adrenaline. I knew I needed to see what was causing the noise, even though every fiber of my being was screaming for me to stay hidden. With shaky hands, I unzipped the tent just enough to peer out. Moonlight filtered through the trees, casting eerie shadows that danced on the ground. And there, just a few feet away, I saw it. It was a large, hulking figure, partially obscured by the darkness. My breath caught in my throat as my eyes locked onto it, two glowing orbs that seemed to pierce through the night. The growl grew louder, more menacing, and the figure took a step closer. Fear paralyzed me, my mind racing to make sense of what I was seeing. My instincts told me to stay hidden, to stay quiet, but curiosity and dread pushed me to inch the tent flap open just a bit more. That's when I saw its shape, a massive, shadowy creature with elongated limbs and sharp glistening teeth. Its eyes never left mine as it stood there, almost as if it were studying me, assessing my fear. As the seconds dragged on, I felt a sense of dread. I couldn't tear my gaze away from those eyes, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a predator, a force much more powerful than me. My heart pounded in my chest, drowning out the sounds of the night, as I realized that whatever this creature was, it was not something to be trifled with. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature turned and melted into the shadows, disappearing into the night. The woods fell silent. I zipped the tent shut, my mind racing with questions and possibilities. Morning came, and I emerged from my tent, shaken but determined to find some rational explanation for the night's terror. I scoured the area around the campsite, half hoping to find evidence of a prank or a wandering animal, but there was nothing, no signs that the creature had ever been there. I tried to shake off the unease, chalking it up to an overactive imagination and the dark of the night playing tricks on my mind. Reluctantly, I shared my experience with my parents over breakfast, expecting them to dismiss it as the product of my teenage imagination. My dad chuckled, attributing the sounds to a nocturnal animal, probably just a bear rummaging around the campsite. Mom nodded in agreement, mentioning that bears were known to roam these parts from time to time. As much as I wanted to accept their explanation, a gnawing feeling remained deep within me. I knew what I'd seen and heard. It was no bear. It was something bigger, something much scarier. Even now, years later, whenever I'm surrounded by the tranquility of the gray outdoors, I can't help but think about that night. I've heard the usual explanations, the logical reasoning, but deep down, I'm certain that what I encountered was something different, something you hear about in urban legends. I always think about going back to that place with some friends and searching for that monster. But that's probably not a good idea, is it? I love to go camping. Been doing it my whole life. Never had a scary experience until this past summer. My boyfriend and I decided to go out to the gorge for some quality time camping. We had always gone with several other people, but this was the first time it was just the two of us. When we got out of the car to prepare our gear for the hike back to the camping spot, two sketchy-looking dudes came out of the trailhead, looked us up and down, and got into their old-school VW camper van. I had a weird feeling but shrugged it off and proceeded back to our camping spot. I had previously camped in the same area a handful of times and knew it pretty well. Once we got back there, I knew of a handful of different camping spots and proceeded to check them all out for the one that would be ideal. I noticed what looked like someone camping further up the hill, so I picked a spot a little further down where we'd be mostly out of sight. Not out of earshot though, as I heard yelling over on the trail. It was starting to get dark by the time we got everything set up, so I figured I'd start looking for firewood. Suddenly this guy appears out of nowhere and asks us if we'd like any help and offered to sell us a bundle of firewood for $10. I laughed because we were in the woods, thus surrounded by wood which I could pick up off the ground, for free. He then said I wouldn't find much wood because they'd already cleared it out over the past few weeks. Few weeks? I asked him how long he'd been camping up there, and he said almost a month. The longest anyone can camp in this area, a national forest, is 2 weeks. I already had the creeps about him, and he claimed he was up there by himself. I asked him why I heard him yelling with someone then, and why he had referred to more people when talking about the wood. He stammered and was like, "Oh well, yeah, there's some dudes I know camping over there up on the other side of the river." Then he proceeds to tell us that he's been lonely since he arrived. He was from Pennsylvania, took a bus to Lexington, Kentucky, and had been living in the woods back behind where I currently work. I knew exactly where he was talking about because I see homeless, immigrants, and drug addicts coming in and out of those woods every day. So basically he was a homeless man who somehow got a ride out to the gorge and decided he would just live there instead. He had been living on snakes, bugs, and selling firewood for food and beer. But he said we were the first people he'd seen in a few weeks. His stories were all over the place, and I knew he was lying about a lot of what he told us. He wasn't alone even though he claimed to be. He even took us to his camp where there was tons of stuff for several guys, not just one. He said he liked camping up top where he could see everything and everyone. By now it was dark and he helped us get a fire going. I was trying to politely get him on his way back up the hill so I could have a minute to process all of this. When he left, I started whispering to my boyfriend that there was no way in hell I could sleep with that lying sketchy homeless creep right up the hill. We didn't have a gun, knife, or even a dog to protect ourselves if we needed to. I said let's quietly get our shit together and get the hell out of here. Which we did, only we left our new tarps set up, because they would make too much noise and he'd know we were leaving. As soon as I stood up with my pack, ready to get the hell out of Dodge, he yells, "How's it going?" and we proceeded to GTFO as quickly and quietly as possible. In my mind we were either getting robbed, kidnapped, killed, or something else, because he was not alone. His stories didn't add up, and his background of where he came from made me believe he was running from something and was trying to hide by living off the grid. I called the Rangers the next morning and told them about him. Luckily, all he got from us was a set of new tarps. Weeks later, we saw on the news that multiple people had gone missing in the area and that there was a manhunt for the guy who wouldn't leave us alone. I always think about how we really dodged a bullet when I insisted that we left. We found a new camping spot the next year. I was about 11, my sister was 13. We slept in the living room of a little caravan we used to stay in over summer. There wasn't a lot to do, the campsite didn't have any amenities. I'd pass the time playing with my sister, taking walks or playing the Nintendo. This was '98, so Castlevania and Donkey Kong Country weren't nostalgic yet, they were just lame. I couldn't wait to get home and back to the PC so I could get my theme Hospital on. But mostly I'd read. I had a collection of books about ghosts, UFOs, cryptids, and such. I'd pick them up at library sales or in charity shops. My favorites were the unexplained true stories, like the Dover Demon or the Gulf Breeze incident. There was a quarry on the other side of the site. Sometimes at night I'd pretend the two red lights were the eyes of the Mothman who'd swoop down to terrorize my family. What I'm getting at here is I was a kid, and I had an active imagination, but I never believed anything spooky would actually happen to me. If something out of the ordinary happens, it's just your mind playing tricks on you, right? I woke up one morning around 6:20. It was gray outside, the sun had just come up, but fog and cloudy skies ensured it wasn't too bright. I felt uneasy, because I'd usually sleep till 9 at least. It was silent. My sister wasn't even snoring as she normally did. And then I heard it. It sounded like a horse galloping. It was just outside the window. It was unsettling, to say the least. Had a horse escaped from a nearby field? Surely not. I'd never seen any horses around here, and what's more, it didn't sound heavy enough. Whatever it was making circles around the caravan. I'd hear it fade a little as it looped around the other end where my parents slept, and then get louder, almost next to my head. It had the irregular rhythm of a gallop, but I never heard 4 legs. It was almost like a person was skipping very, very quickly, but no person could be heavy enough to make the kind of noise on soft ground. It was fading, off into the distance. Whatever it was seemed to have ran off. I breathed a little easier. What a crazy situation. Maybe I hadn't fully woken up yet and was having a dream hangover. And then it came back. It was getting louder and more insistent. I decided to take my chances. "Rosie? Are you awake?" "Yeah," she said, voice quivering. "You can hear that, right?" "Yeah." "What is it?" "I don't know," I answered truthfully. "I'm afraid to look outside though." "Why?" "I'm afraid it might be the devil." She moaned in fear. There was a thump from the other end of the caravan, like whatever was outside had grazed it. I pulled my blanket tighter around me. After about a minute, it faded again. I told myself if it came back, I'd look outside, and the devil be damned. It didn't come back. My parents woke up around 8, made us breakfast, and the fog cleared. We asked them if they'd heard anything strange earlier. They hadn't. There were no scrapes on the caravan that would suggest something heavy bumping against it. Apart from my sister, there was no evidence that anything had ever happened. Except for one rough footprint outside the front door in the shape of a hoof. To this day, I regret not looking outside to see what it was. But when I wake up in the middle of the night and everything seems so strange, I understand why I didn't. Have you ever Googled yourself? A few months ago I was feeling curious and decided to do it out of sheer boredom. With a fairly rare name, I wasn't expecting much in the search results. Yet to my surprise, I stumbled upon a website that had my full name as its domain. Upon clicking the link, I found myself on a message board. The website owner's profile appeared oddly familiar, sharing my age and similar hobbies. Although the message board lacked any posts, I saved it in my favorites due to the intrigue. A month later, I returned to the site. This time it boasted more content featuring diary entries that seemed ordinary at first glance. Notes like the weather was nice today or I'm so bored at work. Yet as time passed, I began noticing an array of coincidences. The owner lived in my city, which struck me as quite a coincidence given the rarity of our shared name. As I delved deeper, I found the diary's contents eerily mirroring my life experiences. One day it mentioned attending the same baseball game I had gone to. At first I dismissed it as a simple chance occurrence given the popularity of the local team. However, the coincidences persisted and became unsettlingly precise. Their pet dog's name matched mine from childhood, and even their favorite restaurant was the same one I frequented during my previous job. One particular day, the message board was filled with birthday wishes for the owner. Oddly enough, it was my birthday as well. Intrigued, I decided to leave a message for the owner, mentioning our shared name and extending a birthday greeting. However, to my surprise, there was no option to type a message. It appeared the message board was merely a static page. Puzzled, I reached out to the owner via email with a simple introduction. Hi there. Believe it or not, we share the same name, birthday, and we're in the same city. Nice to meet you. Just a friendly introduction. A few days later, I got curious again and tried showing the website to some buddies, thinking we'd all have a laugh about it. But guess what? The website was gone. Completely vanished. No trace. It wasn't even in my browsing history. That didn't sit well with me. Something felt off. I mean, it's like the whole thing was there one day and then poof, it just vanished into thin air. And then I got an email from my own email address. It just said, "Found you." Attached was a picture and, I swear my heart stopped. It was me. Sitting at my computer. In my room. And here's the worst part. The angle of the shot was taken from the corner of my room where the window is. You have to climb the side of my house to get to this window. I zoomed in, squinting at every detail. The hairs on my neck stood up as I realized the angle of the picture didn't match up with the window. It was clearly taken from the very corner of my room where I usually keep my old chair piled with clothes. Someone had been inside. My mind raced. Who could have taken this? How did they get inside? I went through every possible explanation. A prank maybe? But the more I thought about it, the more that email and that picture made me feel like I was being watched. Stalked. I can admit I was freaked out. The whole thing went from curious to seriously messed up real quick. I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. Monitored. The thought of someone sneaking around in my personal space snapping a picture while I was totally unaware. It's unsettling, to say the least. I've permanently locked all of my windows now, and I've got this weird paranoia about my room. Like, am I going crazy or was someone actually in here? One night I was scrolling aimlessly through social media, clicking on random links about the dark web and supposedly true stories about crazy encounters. Boredom can drive anyone to the weirdest corners of the web, and that's how I stumbled upon this bizarre post that grabbed my attention. It was an image of my front door. The caption, "Back where I belong," was written below it. I'm not the superstitious type, so I rolled my eyes and chalked it up to a creative attempt at freaking someone out. The next day, I couldn't resist mentioning it to my buddies. Their reactions were a mix of amusement and speculative theories about hidden cameras and creepy stalkers. They laughed it off and I joined in. After all, we're living in the age of tech, where a few clicks can pull up someone's life story, including the color of their socks on a specific day. Probably just some algorithm, I said, dismissing the weirdness. They probably got it from my IP address and Google Maps. They chuckled, teasing me about my lack of supernatural belief. I shrugged it off. It's not like I have anyone that would want to hurt me. But as the night progressed, the sense of being watched started gnawing at me. The shadows from the windows seemed to stretch a bit too far, and every creak of the floorboard sounded like a whisper. Ridiculous, right? A couple of days passed and I thought the unease had finally left me. Until an email from an unknown sender popped up in my inbox. The subject line was empty and the email had a single link. No text, just an ominous hyperlink. Curiosity and a little defiance propelled my finger to click the link. It opened a web page I'd never seen before with a weird combination of numbers and letters as its title. The screen displayed a live feed from my living room where I was sitting with my laptop. I blinked and rubbed my eyes, completely stunned as I saw myself from behind. Clearly there was a camera in my room, but where? Okay, now that's just messed up, I muttered, assuming it was a prank or someone playing with sophisticated tech tricks. But the camera panned around the room and my unease twisted tighter. My eyes darted around the familiar surroundings, trying to figure out where the camera was. That's when I noticed it. The angle was directly in line with the mirror that was mounted on the wall. My heart raced. I approached the mirror and tried looking at the laptop to see if my face was appearing on the live stream, but the website had turned into an error page. I spent some time trying to refresh the website and follow the link from the mail, but it was like it never existed. I checked the mirror again and there was no obvious signs of there being a camera. I was exhausted after a long day and I had quite a few drinks with my friends, so I told myself I was just being paranoid and went to bed. Days went by and I tried to forget the whole thing. Until one night, as I got up to grab some water in the middle of my sleep, I glanced at the mirror again. My reflection was normal, but something in the background wasn't. The edge of a shadowy figure peeked out from the corner of the mirror, a hint of a presence that shouldn't be there. I quickly turned around, heart racing, but there was nothing. The unease tightened its grip again. I need to chill out, I muttered to myself. It's all in my head. I blamed stress, lack of sleep, and the power of suggestion. But when I found my favorite mug smashed to pieces on the floor of my kitchen the next morning, I couldn't stop thinking that someone had been in my house. I was a believer in facts and logic, so when I heard the kitchen door creak open the next night, I didn't jump to supernatural conclusions. I thought it was an intruder. I tried the light switch, but it didn't work. It was practically pitch black. I grabbed my baseball bat and my phone and used its flashlight to investigate. I made my way towards the living room and looked around, aiming the flashlight all over, and suddenly I spot something. The mirror was leaning against the wall and there were obvious wires hanging out of it. I felt a strange mixture of anger and fear. Someone really was messing with me and they were here right now? I shouted, "Who the hell is in my house?" and turned towards the kitchen. But as I did, the lights suddenly came on and blinded me. The world seemed to blur around me. My vision blurred, and then I woke up. I was back in my bed. I sat up, heart pounding. My bedroom was exactly the same as normal. Had it all been a dream? A really weird, vivid dream? I reached for my phone to check the time, and that's why I noticed the notification. An email had come in from an unknown sender. With trembling fingers, I opened it. It was a photograph. Almost the exact same photograph as the one that started this whole thing. It was my front door, but this time it was taken at night. The caption below the image sent shivers down my spine. "Sleep well. Goodbye for now." My eyes darted around the room as if expecting someone to jump out at me. But I was alone. My logical mind tried to find a rational explanation. Maybe it was a prank, an elaborate scheme by someone with too much time on their hands. I rushed to my laptop and checked the sender's email address, but it was a jumble of letters and numbers, impossible to trace. I started to panic as I realized that this wasn't a joke. Someone was watching me, invading my privacy, and I had no idea who or why. I ran back into the living room to check the mirror. It was back on the wall in its usual place. I frantically clawed at it and ended up smashing it on the ground in an attempt to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. I felt like I was going insane, stood barefoot on my broken mirror, shuffling through the shards with my bare hands. The camera was gone. Or it was never there. What was I doing? I locked the front door, drew the curtains, and sat in the dimly lit room, my heart racing. I thought about going to the police, but what could he tell them? That I was receiving strange emails and photographs that seemed impossible to explain. The hours dragged on, and as the night grew darker, I felt my paranoia settling in. I didn't want to admit it, but the rational explanations were wearing thin. Was it really possible that someone was going this far out of their way to terrorize me? As I gazed at my laptop, its webcam staring back at me, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching. I closed the laptop and made my way back to bed. If they wanted to hurt me, they would have done it already, and I was exhausted from this whole ordeal. I accepted my fate and closed my eyes. Good night.
Good night. Sleep tight.
In 2004, my girlfriend and I decided that it would be fun to rent a cabin at a lake for a weekend, a real secluded spot. She was so excited to stay in this crappy little cabin because it had a fireplace, and she had some pent-up aggression from when her parents divorced and sold the house with the fireplace when she was a kid. I digress. When we got to the cabin, we unloaded our stuff and I brought in some bundled firewood for the fireplace. She begged and pleaded me to start the fire, but being as it was about 4 p.m. I refused and suggested that we go fishing instead, promising that not only would I build a fire later, but we could make s'mores inside. She agreed, but made me unbundle the wood and set up the fireplace, so when it was time all I had to do was light it. Fine. In the process of unbundling the wood, a freaking milk snake, Google it, terrifying, but not venomous, neither of us knew this, slithered out of the bundle, onto the floor and into a corner of the living room. She is mortified, I am terrified. We both run screaming out of the cabin to the dock, and I called the rental people and left a OMFG there's a goddamn killer snake trying to kill us message on the machine. My girl was a mess, so I suggested we go out on the boat for a bit to calm down. I started to walk to the cabin to close the door and she told me I wasn't going in there, so obviously, I wasn't going in there. We went out on the boat for about an hour, and when we came back I saw that the screen door had been shut. Ah, thank you, maintenance man. I built the fire as promised, and we sat in front of it telling each other horror stories. All of a sudden I heard a strange noise coming from the direction of the bathroom. It sounded like the raptors from Jurassic Park walking. I immediately figured that Demon Snake had grown some legs and was waiting to kill me, but I had enough of that bastard, so I grabbed a blanket and that fire poker that looks like half of the Saints logo. Game plan: throw a blanket on Snake Beast, beat it to death with pointy piece of iron. As I walked down the hallway, I saw a very large animal being illuminated only by the flickering flames in the other room. Before I could do anything, this demon beast shot out of the bathroom and charged towards me. I ran into the living room, and as I turned around I noticed it was not a demon, but a giant male turkey, all puffed out and aggressive. He was charging around the room, making terrifying noises and scaring the hell out of me and the lady. I started swinging for the fences with the iron stabber and hit it a few times in the body, which did not make it too happy. It charged me again, and I swung that iron rod like my life depended on it. The pointy part on the side hit the turkey in the head and killed it instantly. I threw the turkey in the bed of my truck, got in, and drove to the rental office. When I got there I told them the story, and thanked them for getting rid of the snake, which the maintenance guy seemed confused about, gave him the turkey, and went on my way. The next day the maintenance guy called me and let me know that he had just heard my message and that no one took care of the snake, but his brother had found the snake in the turkey's belly while cleaning it. So turkeys eat snakes, and now you know. Late nights at Walmart had their own peculiar aura. The store's emptiness, the quiet hum of the cooling units, and the distant hum of the highway combined to create an unsettling atmosphere. But I needed the job, and my shift wasn't ending until I restocked the shelves and tidied up. As I took my 15-minute break, I stood outside getting some fresh air. There was a regular stray dog that would always be lingering around the area. I'd actually gotten into the habit of throwing him whatever scraps I could muster up from inside. I started to make my way in and I noticed a man in his 40s pacing near the entrance. His eyes darted around, as if searching for someone. As I passed by, he looked at me, his gaze unnerving. "Hey, could you help me?" he called out, his voice almost too friendly. I hesitated, my instincts urging caution. "Just need a hand loading a couple of things into my truck," he continued, motioning to the exit. Despite my unease, I agreed, thinking it was a straightforward favor. As we reached the entrance, I noticed that his truck was parked in the darkest corner of the parking lot. My heart pounded. This felt wrong, but it was company policy to help people carry things to their car. He gestured to a couple of boxes in the bed of the truck. "Could you just hand me those?" he asked. My fingers twitched with unease, my gut telling me something was off. But I tried to push the thoughts aside and focused on helping. Just as I reached out to grab a box, a shiver ran down my spine. I heard the faintest whisper behind me, the rustling of fabric. It was the sound of movement, of someone stepping out from the shadows. Panic surged through me, and I glanced back. And that's when I saw them, 2 more men, emerging from the darkness, their faces obscured by shadows. My heart raced, my body tensing, and I dropped the box instinctively. My mind screamed at me to run, to get back inside the store, to safety. I turned to bolt, but the man in front of me grabbed my arm, his grip like a vice. "Where do you think you're going?" he sneered, his friendly demeanor now replaced with a menacing grin. Adrenaline surged through me, and I fought to break free. The men were closing in, their intentions unmistakable. I struggled, my heart pounding in my chest, my thoughts a jumbled mess. And then, out of nowhere, a barrage of barks came from the bushes. It was the stray dog that I'd always see around the parking lot. It lunged at the man who had my arm and latched right onto him. I felt so relieved and shocked that I remember I actually let out a smile and a slight giggle. It's weird, but I vividly remember the massive emotional shift from sheer terror to absolute relief when that dog came running out. The grip on my arm loosened, and I wrenched myself free, stumbling back. I started sprinting back to the store, followed only by the sound of the growling, barking, and moans of pain from the man. At this point, my coworker came running out to check on me. I could see the men getting into the truck and driving towards us as I told him what happened. "Get lost," my coworker growled, his voice full of authority. The men hesitated for a moment longer before retreating, disappearing into the darkness. My coworker turned to me, clearly concerned for me. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, my heart still racing, my mind was still racing, and I was on an adrenaline high. That's when the dog ran over, peaceful as ever, wagging his tail and pushing himself into my legs. I gave him the biggest hug and told him how much of a good boy he was. My coworker and I watched as the men disappeared into the night. "We need to call the police," he said firmly, his eyes focused on where the men had vanished. We retreated back into the store and dialed 911. Within minutes, the police arrived, and I recounted the chilling encounter to them. They assured us they would patrol the area and keep an eye out for any suspicious activity. The dog stayed with me the whole time as the police took our statements. We had narrowly escaped a potentially dangerous situation, and it was a sobering reminder of the risks that came with late-night shifts. In the days that followed, news spread about a group of individuals attempting to lure unsuspecting victims into their trap. The police were investigating, and I felt a mix of relief and gratitude that my new best friend had come to my rescue. Late nights at Walmart would never be the same for me. The unsettling atmosphere was now a haunting reminder of the night I barely escaped danger. A few years back, while I was doing any work I could get, I took up this gig at the 24/7 Walmart. It was a bit more rundown than your typical Walmart. Dimly lit aisles, flickering fluorescent lights, and an eeriness that only an empty Walmart at 3 in the morning can provide. I'm stocking shelves in the cereal aisle, just trying to keep myself awake with the monotonous routine. And then, out of nowhere, this guy saunters in. He's tall. I mean basketball player tall, with long strides that make him seem like he's on some sort of mission. There's hardly anyone around, and this dude's pacing down the aisles like he owns the place. Kind of weird, but not out of the ordinary Walmart weird. Just a late-night shopper with a peculiar vibe. I'm busy stacking cereal boxes when I catch sight of him again. He's standing at the end of the aisle staring at me with this grin that could send shivers down your spine. The lighting is wonky, casting these creepy shadows that don't help my nerves. Before I can even process what's happening, he's right there, right in front of me. Close enough that I can smell the alcohol on his breath. He shoots me this look like he's got the juiciest secret in the world, and then he says,
I've done something very naughty.
I try to laugh it off, brush it away with a nervous chuckle. But he's not having it. He keeps staring, that grin still plastered on his face. It's late, it's quiet, and the place is kind of creepy already. But this guy, he's turned it up to 10. He starts following me. Aisle after aisle. Every time I turn around, there he is, watching with that stupid smile. It's like he's playing a twisted game of hide and seek, and I'm not even a player. More like the unwilling target. I try to get on with my work, but I can feel his eyes on me like they're drilling holes into my back. Then, out of nowhere, he starts humming this tune. It's faint, just under his breath, but it's off-putting as hell. I can't put my finger on where I've heard it before, but it's that famously creepy whistling song. I decide to take a breather and head to the break room. Maybe I can shake him off and catch a few moments of normalcy. My coworker's in there and we're making small talk about assignments and exams, trying to keep things light. But the whole time, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. And guess what? I was right. I spot him at the entrance to the break room, just standing there, staring right at me. I freeze and I swear the room got colder in that moment. I point him out to my coworker, and when he turns around, the guy's vanished. I glance at my coworker. I couldn't read his expression. I asked him, "Did you see that?" He looks at me. The confusion is obvious in his eyes. See what? Clearly, he saw nothing. I realized that he missed the entire encounter. It was only me who saw him. I run my fingers through my hair, feeling a mixture of paranoia and frustration. Never mind, I mutter, dismissing the topic. Maybe I'm just letting my imagination get the best of me. It was late and I had not slept properly in days. My coworker's not as intrigued as I am. He's focused on the task at hand, more interested in getting his work done than delving into whatever nonsense I was talking about. We head back to our posts and I'm still rattled. I can't shake the image of that guy's grin. Hours pass and I try my best to concentrate on my tasks, but the unease is a constant presence in the back of my mind. I keep glancing around, half expecting him to reappear. That creepy grin plastered on his face. And then, out of nowhere, he's back. My heart skips a beat and my hands tremble. It's like a nightmare come true. He's standing there, that same grin on his face. My breath catches in my throat. Before I can even react, he's sprinting towards me, his steps quick and purposeful. Panic surges through me and I freeze. What does he want? My mind races, but my body is paralyzed. He grabs me and easily picks me up. He starts shaking me and shouting in my face. And then, as if from a distance, I hear a shout. My coworker's voice cuts through the fear. "Hey, get off her." He's running towards us, his footsteps echoing in the aisle. The guy releases his grip on me, his attention shifting to my coworker. And in that split second, I find my voice. I scream as loud as I can and start beating on him. My coworker arrives, his presence enough to make the guy hesitate. He turns and bolts, disappearing down the aisle. I'm left shaking, my heart pounding. My coworker rushes to my side. He looks seriously concerned. "Are you okay?" he asks me. I nod. I'm completely out of breath from the screaming. We're both shaken, both trying to make sense of the madness that just unfolded. We call the police, and as we wait for them to arrive, I can't help but replay the encounter in my mind. What was that guy's deal? Why would he attack me? The police arrive and we recount the bizarre events. They search the area, but the guy is long gone. I tell him what happened and try to describe just how creepy and weird he was, and I mention that he said he'd done something naughty that night. Suddenly there's like 4 more cop cars pulling up, and they're taking this real seriously. My manager sent me home for the night and told me I didn't have to come in tomorrow. I checked the news the next day and saw that there had been a hit and run nearby with a suspected drunk driver killing a family of 3. The description of the suspect was almost exactly the same as the guy who attacked me. What the hell was this guy's problem? As far as I know, they never found him. I check the news occasionally just to see if he comes up, but I've not seen anything since.